Hello, all my dear friends. This is Maxine Taylor, America's first licensed astrologer, and I have the forecast for the United States for March 2024. As those of you who follow me regularly know, I have been waiting to share some of this information with you because it can be very, very powerful and incredibly helpful. So I've got papers everywhere, so just bear with me, okay? Now, for those of you who are new to my channel, I'm going to go through the transit, the orbit of the Sun, Venus, Mercury, Mars, and Jupiter. I'm also going to go through the new moon and the full moon. So here we go. Let's start with, excuse me, guys. Let's start with the Sun, the yellow planet right here. The Sun is the giver of life. It is the center of our universe. Now, it starts off in the 10th house of the party in power and the president himself. And then on the 3rd, really just before you can blink, it's in the 11th house. I am going to describe what each house means. I do this every single month because there are always new people. And even the people who are regulars might need a little refreshing. The way I say it might trigger something in you that gives you an aha moment. I love aha moments. Now, if you're a student of astrology, you know what the houses are. In a birth chart, when we're dealing with a chart of a country, the mundane houses are defined differently because there are millions of people involved usually. So as I go through it, excuse me, we are pollinated here in Atlanta. As I go through this, I'm going to read the meanings, the mundane meanings of the houses so that you get the full picture, okay? Now, do I need to read them out loud? Yes, because some of you are advanced students and you may not need to have the houses described. But for the new people, I'm going to do it. And hopefully everybody will get something out of this. Okay, let's go. Well, the Sun it has been in the 10th house of the party in power. The 10th house also rules not just the party in power, but the leader of the party in power, which is, of course, President Biden. 10th house. And I think I've just covered the 10th. The president, it's also the reputation of the United States or any country for that matter. This is what the world sees of your country. And there are many charts for the United States. I use the chart with Gemini rising, 7 degrees of Gemini, Aquarius on the midheaven, and the moon in Aquarius. For those of you who have no idea what I just said, don't worry about it. I'm speaking to those people who want astrologies, so to speak. I am translating into small terms, smaller words, so that both the left brain and right brain can hear it. Okay, there is a method to my madness. Okay, let's go to this. Now, on the 3rd of March, the Sun enters the 11th house. Now, traditionally in a personal chart, the 11th house rules hopes and wishes and friends and humanitarian projects of all types. It's a beautiful house. In the 11th house of a country, it also rules groups. It rules Congress and congressmen. It rules legislation, the Treasury. It rules smaller political groups like the city and county councils. It does rule friends, and these would be the friends of the United States. And so here's the sun just sitting there. The light of the giver of life, because that's what the sun is, lights up everything. And so you might say, are we having congressional hearings? Every time Congress meets, it's a congressional hearing. And so with the sun there, we can make progress. I hope. It's setting it up, which is super. Now, we have a new moon and a full moon. The new moon is when the energy starts moving forward. That is on the 10th of March, and it's in 20 degrees of Pisces. And so with a new moon in the 11th house of Congress, congressmen, etc., everything I just read off to you, there can be progress made. I turned on the news today, this morning, and I noticed that while there are still holdouts, Congress itself seems to be moving forward. This is really positive. Now, the new moon, excuse me, I've got papers everywhere, forms what is called a T cross, and it empties into the 7th house of contracts, international affairs, war, lawsuits, the public, open enemies. The 12th house is hidden enemies, open enemies, lawyers, politics, marriage and divorce, and the lower courts. Okay. So on the new moon, on March 3rd, excuse me, March 10th, the T cross is formed, and there is going to be a lot more interaction in that 7th house. And I just read you the meanings of the 7th house. And when we're dealing with open enemies, it gets tricky because sometimes they're with us and sometimes they're not. All right. So that's the first lunation. We have a full moon 2 weeks later. And this full moon is a lunar eclipse. That means it is on a full moon, everything comes to a head. On a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse, it is even stronger and lasts longer. When you have an eclipse anywhere, you're going to feel that at least 2 weeks ahead of time. In other words, it will coincide with the new moon. All right. And it will last until the next pair of eclipses come along, at least. Now, because an eclipse is strongest 3 to 4 months after it occurs, you want to see when that occurs. Mark your calendar, because the full moon then will be felt really strongly in this 5th house. And I'm getting ready to read the meaning of the 5th house to you. It's on March 25th. And for those of you who study astrology, it's in 5 degrees of Libra. All right. in the United States chart, while it does not activate Neptune or Saturn, which are sitting in that fifth house, it activates everything the fifth house rules. So here we go. The fifth house rules children. And if you've been watching the news, you know that the attention has been focusing more on children, whether it's because they're, unfortunately, a madman has entered their school and brought hell with him. But also all the good stuff. It triggers, and I will read this to you so that you can get the whole idea. It rules children, it rules fun, it rules sports. Boy, what a fabulous outlet, sports. Like it rules gambling, it rules the movies, it rules the birth rate, it rules congressional and public hearings. Ta-da. And it rules stadiums. So speculation, enjoyment, fun, and this particular lunation, this particular lunar eclipse forms what is called a grand trine, which is a blessing, so that the situation involving children, and I'm thinking in terms of what just came down the pike, so to speak, a couple of days ago with frozen embryos, frozen cells. Once again, that talks about children. Unbelievable. There is more money being spent as a result of this particular eclipse. And you might say, well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I guess it's up to the individual spending the money. But there is a certain amount of optimism. I don't mean everybody, of course. There's always an issue when you're dealing with millions of people. The second house in the United States chart, as in your own personal chart, money, hearings, savings, finances, the stock exchange, banks, and personal debts. There is, when I see this particular configuration, the image that comes to mind is somebody saying, do you want dessert? And you go, oh, sure, why not? It's indulgence. So you determine if that's positive or negative. It could be too much of a good thing. So that's what's going on with the sun. We got more stuff to talk about. Let's talk about Mercury. Mercury is our conscious mind. Now, Mercury is going to move into the shadow of the retrograde on March 19th. When Mercury goes retrograde, for those of you who may not be familiar with the terminology, it appears to be moving backwards in the heavens. And what it does is brings confusion with it. We do not begin a new project under a retrograde Mercury because it either fizzles out completely or has to be redone during the year. Okay. When Mercury is in the shadow of the retrograde, it feels just like Mercury is retrograde because it brings with it confusion, particularly in the areas of communication, correspondence, transportation, all kind of communication. Mercury will go retrograde April 2nd, but we'll talk about that in April, okay? Mercury is sitting in The 11th house, which I already mentioned before, but I'll go over it again. Congress, congressmen, legislation, treasury, city and county councils, and friends. It's beautiful. On the 25th, Mercury moves into that 12th house. Now, Mercury is the conscious mind. Let me tell you about the 12th house in a mundane chart. It rules bribery, it rules spies, it rules hidden enemies. And I would be willing to bet that that applies to every single country on this planet. It rules prisons, jails, hospitals, crime, criminals, so that bargains are made behind the scenes. That is a given. This is all behind the scenes, because in a personal chart, the 12th house deals with privacy and the subconscious mind. Okay. On a positive note, the 12th house rules charitable institutions, seclusion, hospitals, secret societies, secret groups, and welfare, and anything that even smacks of historical slavery. That's where the conscious mind is. And so there's going to be all kind of behind the scenes communication, behind the scenes committees meeting, which is why, you know, when members of Congress are interviewed by the news media, they really just gloss over the question that was asked of them, and they just say what they want to say, because it's all about, you know, being in front of the camera. But with Mercury in the 12th house, there's all kind of communication behind the scenes with our hidden enemies. Got it? Good. Okay. Now let's keep going. Venus, love and beauty and art, and it's the greater benefic. It absolutely brings happiness. It brings money. All right. It's in the 10th house of the president until the 22nd. And so again, that 10th house is the president, the USA, our reputation, the party in power, our public image, and our leaders. And this is representative of the president, President Biden. Venus sits on the moon on the 2nd of March. So as soon as the calendar changes, there is going to be a much more caring and loving tone that President Biden is going to be sharing with the world. Our moon is in Aquarius, and so we are humanitarians. And so that just be watching the news. Now, on the 22nd, Venus enters the 11th house of Congress, congressmen, legislation. I mean, can you see people being loving and kind and all that? See people being loving and kind and all of that. Legislation, the treasury, all councils, city and county, and friends. These are our friends. And it can very well be that there can be bipartisanism. Did I just make up a new word? Bipartisan communication. In other words, Democrats and Republicans can, with Venus in the 11th, agree I don't know on how much, but they can agree. And the last thing I want to share with you, dun, 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 Mars. Mars is our warrior. Mars is what we fight with and fight for. It is impatience. It is wherever it falls. It's like you're running as fast as you can. You're moving as fast as you can. This is the 10th house. This 10th house is President Biden. On the 2nd, and I think, didn't we have Venus? Yes, Venus is on the moon on March 2nd, and Venus and Mars is on the midheaven, the top of the chart, our public image, on the 2nd. And so I believe that with Mars sitting on the midheaven and then the moon, which is emotion, intellectual, it's in Aquarius. So it's the president speaking, really letting it all hang out. The first week of March, because Mars will be sitting on the moon on the 8th. And while this can be terrific, unfortunately, Mars squares Uranus, and Uranus sits right on the USA's ascendant, Gemini. I didn't put it in here because I don't want to confuse things. You got Mars, which is the warrior, squaring Uranus, which is the rebel, the explosive, unexpected rebel. And so President Biden will say something, and it's going to trigger rebellion on the part of some people. Well, that's nothing new for our country, unfortunately. And the Uranus here, these are the mundane houses. The first house in a mundane chart is the attitude and political mood of the people. It also deals with public health, and there are a lot of issues on that. But whatever President Biden says is really going to stir people up. And fortunately, Venus brings love as well for those who can see it and hear it coming from the president. Okay, let me make sure I've covered everything here. Jupiter, hidden in the 12th house. Now, we talked about the 12th house because Mercury moves into the 12th house on the 25th. Jupiter just sits there all month. Remember, it was retrograde. Jupiter is God's law. Jupiter is the greater benefic. It brings blessings. It brings truth. It's in the 12th house of our hidden enemies. So there's lots of talking, lots of communicating. I would much prefer that we have Jupiter here than something volatile. And so I guess what I'm saying is, having saved the best for last, don't give up. Every country has behind the scenes activities, hidden enemies. And with Jupiter, the greater benefic, in that 12th house, progress from God can be made. I was talking to a dear friend of mine last night, and we both decided that we wanted to visualize, which means move into the state of the world the way we would like it to be. Some of you, I'm sure, have done that. I know, because I know what my audience is comprised of. And by the way, I really enjoy your comments. They are, some of you are very insightful. You hear not only what I'm saying, but what I'm not saying, and I appreciate that very much. So, I want a world of love and peace. I want a world where everybody is equal. Now that's, you might say, well, good luck on that one, Max. In my world is comprised of beautiful people who see the truth and want more of it, who come from love. Because when you come from love, miracles happen. And for those of you who have been to my full moon ceremonies, whether online or in person, you know that if you put your hand on your heart, put your attention there, this is where you put your hand to create love and move into love. Because then when you move into love, that's what you share with the world. I love walking into the supermarket and just smiling at people. And you know what happens? They smile back. And it spreads. And they don't know what hit them. Because you feel so good. What I'm suggesting is visualize your world the way you want it. Will there be people who want war? Of course. I understand that. I'm looking for peace, for justice, but for truth, most of all, love. And so, with that thought, my dear friends, my blessing for you is so simple. May the stars shine brightly on you and yours and your country and our entire planet. And I look forward to being with you next month. Bye for now.